Hello, AP. Mr. Salinas here. I want to go ahead and spend some time to cover how do you ace the short answer question, also known as the short answer question, or I'm sorry, the SAQ. So the SAQ, let's talk about what it is and how we're going to utilize the strategy that we refer to as ACE. So let's first talk about what is an SAQ and then what are the types. So an SAQ is short for short answer question, and it is an open-ended question. The short answer question has two types. It has something called with stimuli. So this is going to be in almost all cases a visual of some sort, like a painting, a cartoon, a graph, a table, a map, and so on. Here is an image, the Bloody Massacre. So if you were to have an image and then the prompts, this would be considered with stimuli. Okay, so you can see this on the AP exam or in one of our tests for periods for the period exams. You also have what's called a text stimuli. So this is when you have a possibility of having maybe like two works of primary sources. So it could be maybe a speech, it could be a writing of some sort, and usually it's in a very comparative style. So you'll look at two different essentially bodies of work, and then you'll be prompted to answer in an ABC type of style, and I'll explain that in a little bit. So that's what we refer to a text stimuli. And then you have one without stimuli. So it's just basically three prompts. And I'll show you an example of that as well. And so once again, just to review, the short answer question is an SAQ. It is an open-ended question that falls under these type of categories. So how do you write the SAQ? A couple things. You want to make sure that you directly answer the question. You have to be painfully explicit. Answer the question. Do not repeat the question. Answer it. Okay, this is one component of that ACE process. And again, I'll go over that in just a moment. You want to make sure you use the phraseology of the question included in there. Don't rewrite or repeat the question. You don't want to do that, but you want to use essentially their vocabulary when you are addressing the question. The most important thing there being that you actually address the specific question in the prompt. You want to include specific historical terms, events, and people. That you're going to do this at each section. This is why that student virtual notebook that you do for our course or for the unit and period time, the time period, become important. It's to familiarize with those different terms and events that happen within each unit. You want to limit your response to about 2 to 4 what we call content-rich sentences. So you don't want to just say things to say it. AP graders, and when we assess these, we can usually depict or usually point easily find out when you're just writing to write. We want to make sure that you're addressing the question and it's done in a very direct way. So you want content-rich sentences. You want to make sure you letter each part and you put a blank between the lines, so your grader, it's a lot easier to grade them. That's only going to work in your benefit. So I'll explain that in just a moment as well. So, like for example, you may want to write the letter A in your book that you would write your answers, and then write your answer after the letter A. Then you would space, and then you would write the letter B, prompt B, and then you write your answer there. Then you would write the letter C, and again, you would write your answer there. So again, I'll show you an actual example in just a moment. All right, so the other thing you want to do is you want to make sure you explain the relationship, the effect, or the connections between each of A, B, and C. So this is important, and this is a way to show that you know what you're talking about and your ability to take historical information and identify those relationships and those effects. You want to make sure you include the whys and the hows. Those are going to be important to earn those points. And you want to make sure you synthesize. So how do you connect all of this together? Okay, this is going to be in that ACE strategy that I'm going to go over in just a moment. All right, so short answer question and the use of ACE. So what does the ACE stand for? The A stands for clearly answering the question. Okay, I'll repeat that again. Directly answer the question that it's asking. You want to cite specific evidence so you can support that answer you provided in the A part of it. Okay, the more specific, the better you're going to be off. Finally, you want to expand your answer by providing further analysis or historical context. Okay. The short answer question is about 20% of your overall exam, and you will have a short answer question in every single period test that we have. So it's not going anywhere. You will have to do it. It is just better to kind of get some practice in. Okay. So here's some examples. This one here is what we would call without stimuli. So you have A, B, and C. This is an example of a short answer question. A says, briefly explain one important similarity between the British colonies in the Chesapeake region and the British colonies in the New England, that's a typo there, in New England in the period from 1607 to 1754. Actually, that's not a typo. I take that back. So the British colonies in New England in the period from 1607 to 1754. Sorry about that. So what you want to make sure is you address this question. So it's asking for one important similarity. Similarity is the key there, and one is key. All right, you're not going to get extra points to give us more than one. You don't want to do that. Just give one. When you really look at these short answer questions, it's not really about right or wrong. It's just accurate or less accurate. There's many ways you can go to address this, and the time frame is 1607 to 1754. So you have to be within that time range. So you got to know enough content to know what were some of the similarities between those regions during that time period. Let's say you give an example of a similarity between these colonies or these regions, like in the 1770s. All right, that would, while you could provide a good description or a good similarity, you would be outside of that time period. And you got to make sure you stay within that. Okay. If you look at part B, it says briefly explain one important difference between the British colonies in the Chesapeake region and the British colonies in New England in the period from 1607 to 1754. So what's the difference? You're still explaining only one, but this time you're explaining the difference between them. Okay, so that's important. And again, you're going to apply the ACE method for A, for B, and for C. Okay, so C says briefly explain one factor that accounts for the difference that you indicated in B. All right, so again, 2 to 4 sentences for A, 2 to 4 sentences for B, 2 to 4 sentences for C. And you want to make sure you're using that ACE method. Clearly answer the question, cite specific evidence, expand your answer by providing historical context or analysis. So let's see how this looks. Here's another example. We're going to take only one of those prompts. Okay, let's take prompt A in this case. So it says, briefly explain one important political development of the sectional conflict over slavery during the 1850s. So once again, what they're asking you to do is to explain just one, and what that one is a political development. Okay, the political development, so a political event per se of some sort, as you'll see here in just a moment, and then that it has everything to do with the difference between the North and the South and how they handled slavery. And then my other thing I have to follow is that it has to be during the 1850s. So I got to stay in those parameters. Okay, 1850s has to do with slavery, has to do with the sectional conflict, and it has to be a political development. All right, so once you get that, you can start kind of writing some ideas down, and then you can produce your answer. So this is how I would address this question. I would use the ACE method just for letter A. Okay, don't get this confused with the A being that it means prompt A. No, it's just ACE would apply to both A, B, and C. In this case, I only have A here. All right, so let's go ahead and answer this question. So the A part is the answer. Here's how I would address this. The Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854 was another attempt to settle the sectional conflict over slavery during the 1850s. I am giving them one political development. That political development is Kansas-Nebraska Act. Okay, so I'm good there. Remember, it has to do, sorry about that, it has to do with slavery. Okay, it has to do with slavery to solve that sectional conflict. And then it's in 1854, so I meet that parameter that has to be the 1850s. Okay, and if you notice, I'm specific. I'm not giving them multiple answers. I'm giving them one, and that's what they ask for, and that's what I'm giving them. Okay. Now, the second part, C, cite. So this is me citing now specific evidence. The act split the Nebraska Territory into two new territories, Nebraska and Kansas, and allowed each territory to determine free state or slave state through popular sovereignty. Okay, I'm citing specific evidence to address this prompt. Okay? Citing specific evidence and giving that historical context to what I had said in the A component, the answer. The final thing you want to do to earn all points is to expand on this specific prompt. So here's an example. Although the Kansas-Nebraska Act attempted to settle the conflict over slavery through a more democratic means, it consequently allowed slavery to expand beyond the Missouri Compromise line of 3630 and was considered a political victory for slave power. So this is more of approaching synthesizing. You're making connections. You're pointing out that the Kansas-Nebraska Act was a political development and it had everything to do with the sectional conflict over slavery, and it had to do with this during the 1850s. You then further explain that this act was had important consequences, and one of those was that prior to the Missouri Compromise, or regardless of what that compromise did, which was to limit slavery, expansion of slavery, it consequently did not, because they agreed on this. When you looked at it, it actually was more of a political victory for slave power. Now, this student is clearly expanding and synthesizing and making these connections based on this one prompt. Okay. All right, so hopefully that is a better explanation as to what a short answer question is and what we are expecting, or what I'm expecting you to produce when you do your first SAQ. All right, thanks for listening, guys. And again, if you have any questions, please send me an email.